I hope everybody can hear me. And good morning, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Adrian Welsh, and I am the Application Support Engineer for Juniper Systems. One of my primary applications that I support is Juniper Aspect Field Mapping Solutions. And I'm joined today by Jim Benson. He's the Product Manager for Juniper Aspect. And I guess kind of let me know if you can't hear me right now or very well. You could type in the little question chat box down there at the bottom, and we can address the issues if you can hear me or you can't hear me. And today we're going to go over a real brief training webinar on the introduction to using Juniper Aspect. I say brief because there are a lot of topics to cover, and I want to try to fit all this into a 1-hour webinar. The purpose of this training is to maximize your efficiency using the software, and as well as help anybody with any kind of particular issues you may be seeing. The main audience for this webinar are people who are using Juniper Aspect or IntuiTrace, but it is open for anyone who wants a better understanding of the software as well. Here we go, Juniper Aspect. Okay, next slide. So here's the training outline for today's webinar, and you can see how I kind of delimited each topic here. There are 3 real basic topics to cover. There's installation, which I'm going to try to go over about 5 minutes. It shouldn't be too long. The projects and map window should be about 10 minutes with some questions and answers. And the objects database, which should be about 10 minutes with some questions and answers as well. If I have some time at the end, I'll try to go over a few tips and tricks and also any kind of last-minute questions that any of y'all may have, as well as any kind of special case scenarios. And if anyone has any questions as I'm going along, you can type a question into the question box there, and as well as there's a little button you can click on the webinar that says raise your hand, and we can address the issue that you may be having. And typing a question into the box is probably the best way to go about now. And as we go along, Jim will be reading me the questions that we get, and we'll try to get to each one if we have time. And if not, we can go over them later. If you have questions afterwards, or if I may not get to your question, you can always email me at support@junipersys.com, and we'll go over some contact information at the end of this webinar as well, so you don't have to write that down just yet. And I guess without any further ado, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Normally I start this off with a demonstration of the handheld software, but for this webinar in particular, I just want to go over the desktop software and not really touch on any handheld stuff. And so the first part I wanted to talk about is the installation of Juniper Aspect. Since most of y'all have probably had this installed already, you probably know all about the installation as it is, but I kind of want to go over a few details just to make sure we're all on the same board here. In general, right now, the best way to install Juniper Aspect is by using the CD that came after you purchased the product. And on this CD, I have a little picture here I wanted to show you on the CD. So on this CD is, I don't know if you can see this very well or not, this is what the CD jacket looks like. And inside the CD jacket, there is a little blank for your serial number. This is something you need to keep. This serial number is kind of your license to using Juniper Aspect, and it'll remain with you for the duration of how long you want to keep it. As well as inside the CD jacket, there's a little flap that looks like this that has your mobile serial number on it. And depending on how many mobile devices you have will depend on how many of these little flaps you have that have your mobile serial number on it. And these are good to keep hold of. We do have a record here in-house. If you do happen to lose your number, we can look it up, but it's not always very easy on our end. But in any case, the best way to install it is with the CD that comes with it. But if you are in some kind of jam and you don't have the CD and you need to get the software installed, on our website we have a way to install the software as well. So if you were to go to junipersys.com, this is our home page. I kind of want to walk you through where to find some support for Juniper Aspect. If you put your mouse over the support menu at the top and go down to downloads, and from here you can push over to applications, And this is where you find Juniper Aspect. And under the Downloads, Applications, and just click on Juniper Aspect here. And here we have support for the mobile software, the desktop software, and for ActiveSync. And you do have to have ActiveSync or Mobile Device Center installed on your computer before you use this software. And if you try to install the software without having ActiveSync installed, it'll give you a warning and try to help you install the ActiveSync as it is. So I'm going to click on this Juniper Aspect desktop software link here, and it makes a link over here to the side. And if I didn't have my CD for installation, I can go over to this Juniper Aspect.exe file. This is basically the same as putting the CD into your CD drive. It is 160 megabytes, so it may take a little while to download, but it is what you would need to use if you don't have the CD to install your software. And if you have any problems with the installation or needing a license, you can always contact sales@juniperassist.com for this information. Once the software gets installed, the first thing it'll do is ask you for your serial number, and that's what I was talking about, that picture that I showed you, the CD jacket. And I kind of want to talk about a couple of things here now. We have two licenses, or two different, I guess, editions now of Juniper Aspect. We have a professional edition and a standard edition. I think most of our folks have the professional edition. Oops. Here, there we go. But trying to minimize this stuff here. Okay, I'm getting confused. Okay, sorry. And if you're not sure which edition you have, if you go into the Tools section of Juniper Aspect and go into About, here is where it'll tell you which product level you have. And so I'm using the professional level, and if you have the standard level, it'll say standard down there. And this is one thing I wanted to show you as well. This is kind of new to Juniper Aspect from IntuiTrace. If you have a standard level license and you wanted to upgrade to a professional level, all you need to do is call us, get a new serial number, and this button here that says Change, this is where you would type in that new number. So you click on Change, and here you type in a new number. It's really fast. It just enables the features that are disabled with the standard version, and then you're good to go. We can go over some of the details later of what the main differences are between professional and standard levels, but I kind of just wanted to give you a real brief overview right now of what it is. Sorry, get rid of this. There we go. Another thing is installing to the mobile software. So I don't have a mobile device connected. As you can see, it says no device connected. But to install to the mobile software, you just go to Mobile Deployment with your device connected and click on Install. And it'll tell you which version is on your mobile device and which version you have. And if there's a conflict between the two, you probably want to click this blue button over here to upgrade to the later version. The same goes for the professional and standard level licenses with the mobile software. There would be a button here on the side that you can change. Say you had a standard level license, you wanted to upgrade to a professional level license. You click on the Change button. That's where you put that in. And here it tells you what level you have. This is have nothing connected. It doesn't know which version I'm running here, so it says none. That's kind of all I wanted to talk about with the installation. Another thing I wanted to just briefly mention before we get into the project is the stuff you have in the Tools menu here. So check for updates is always good to do occasionally. Here it'll look at our server and see what we have that's available. And currently, I think I'm running the latest version, and this is kind of taking a while, but it's looking to see what later versions are out there. And if we do run a new release or an update or an enhance or something like that, this is where you'd find it. And once it finds it, you can click on download it or to install it, and that's how you get that. I guess this is going to take a while to load. I wish I had my back button active here. I can back out of this. Okay, still going. I'm going to close this and open this again. So let me close it. Oh, maybe not. So other stuff in the check for updates, or in the Tools menu, we have check for updates. I can't show it all to you right now because it's still looking for available versions. But there's also a preferences section, and right now all preferences has is switching what your units of measurement is. And the two options we have right now are feet and meters. And I imagine most folks in the U.S. are using feet. Probably in Canada you use meters, but that's where you change it between feet and meters. Another thing in the tool section is a help button, and what the help button does is it goes out to, here we go, I can get it back. The help button goes to our user manual. So if you have any questions on how to do anything, the user manual is very robust and has a lot of information that can help guide you to whatever you need to get to. But let me get into the project section now. Like I said, normally we start these demonstrations with a handheld demonstration of what you do when you map some data in the field. And what we do normally after we map some data on the handheld, we come into the project, synchronize the data together, and go from there. But we're skipping the handheld portion today and going straight into the desktop portion. And what you normally see when you have your handheld connected is you'll have these light bulbs here. The green check means that both projects are synchronized together on your handheld and your desktop. If you have no handheld connected, you'll see these green light bulbs on every project, which is a good thing. If you do have a handheld connected with a synchronization conflict, meaning that maybe the desktop or the handheld software is more up to date than the other, you'll see a yellow light bulb, and you'll want to click on this button here that you can't see right now. It's grayed out. It's the two arrows going back and forth that synchronizes the project. Let me start off with a new project. I'm going to just create a new one. I'm not sure what to call it. I'll just call it 3. So it'll show up in my list. Once I create this, it shows up in my list in a second alphabetically. And here it is. I kind of want to look at a couple of the newer features we have with Juniper Aspect compared to Intuitrace, and some of the stuff that we think that is a lot more helpful than what we used to have as well. And once this loads, I'll get a chance to show you. I'm sure it's taking time. Sorry about that. Okay, so I have my map open here. And the first thing that happens is you see the world map. And the newer feature I wanted to show you here is our address search bar. And this is a great feature that we implemented. We had a lot of requests for this, and I'm glad we have this now. But let me just type in our address here so I can demonstrate how this works. And as you see, as I'm typing, it starts populating the list below it. And when I click on the result I want, it'll zoom to that level there. And this is our facility here in Logan, Utah. And a couple of things we added as well that may be newer to you is under the base map layers, we have a new type of imagery. Beforehand, we had just the ArcGIS Online or the Esri imagery. We had this world imagery and world street map. But now at the professional level license, we have these images as well as Bing imagery. And to show you the difference, let me take a look at the Bing aerial. And you can see it's a little bit different than the image we saw before. It was taken a different time of year, so the grass is a little bit greener. And maybe the angle will be a little bit different from the airplane that took the picture from. And the main reason we have both of these images on here is for sometimes one image is not suitable enough. And so let me give you an example. So in our facility here in Logan, Utah, when I zoom in a little bit with the Bing imagery, just by rolling my mouse up, you can see the imagery sort of fades out, and I get this broken camera looking icon here. But when I go back into my base map layers and go to the world imagery, the image is there, so I can zoom in a lot further with the Esri or the ArcGIS Online imagery than I can with the Bing imagery. And this is not the same case for all places around the country, around the world. It sort of is a trade-off between different places. In some places, the Esri imagery is not sufficient at all, where the Bing will help out a lot, and vice versa in other places. So it's kind of dependent on location, and also a lot of it dependent on personal preference. So if I were to zoom out one tick here, I don't really like this image too much just because it looks kind of faded and a little bit gray. And so if I were to go in and change that back to my Bing imagery, and I kind of like the looks here where it's having greener grass, and like I said, it's a personal preference thing. Let me close this project out and go to a different project that I want to show you. So when I close the project, it goes back to my project list, and I started creating a little example project here with the Bear River bottoms. The Bear River is the river that flows through our area here, and there was a research team working on mapping out the trees and the easements around the area, and I was sort of duplicating this map. Didn't get very far, but I just want to use this as an example. So this image here is still part of northern Utah. The blue line is the Bear River, and the green areas are ownership by PacifiCorp. Let me zoom into my mapping area here and change one little setting real quick. See a little better. Okay. So this is an example of not using Juniper Aspect just for irrigation mapping, but using it for doing some vegetation mapping, using some trees and some local shrubs in the area. Let me zoom in a little closer to my trees here. And so this is kind of a demonstration of how else the software can be used outside of irrigation mapping. And so if I know of my land ownership area, I can either walk this area here, or really I just drew this green area in. I was able to use the background imagery to get an idea of where the riverbank was, as well as where the boundary of the land should be based on these trees here. And I can go outside and map these areas. So I had different serviceberry trees mapped, some cottonwoods and some dogwoods. And this is kind of just an example of what you can do with it. And kind of going through this list here, I can look at my base map layers and take a look at the Bing imagery to see if it'll work in this area. And it does. Looks like it's not too bad looking. Let me turn this land ownership layer off to see if it looks pretty good. It looks actually pretty good. My trees look a lot more crisp. I can kind of see if these dots line up or not, and if they should be where they should be. I guess just the purpose of this webinar is to kind of give you some insight on how to use the map window. So I kind of want to go through each of these buttons here. The navigation buttons are pretty self-explanatory. The pan just moves around the map back and forth. Zoom in, zoom out. You draw a box to zoom in, draw a box to zoom out to get to the area you want, like so. Doing the project extent, this will zoom to all my mapped layers. If I do that, it'll zoom all the way out to where my river is mapped at. So you can see it goes down to the bottom here. I'm going to zoom back into those trees I was looking at earlier. And I showed you earlier already with the base map layers. So we have 3 Bing layers here and 3 ArcGIS Online layers. And with Bing, I can turn just the road maps on, where it just shows me the roads, and I kind of have an indication of my river here. That's pretty nice. I can have the hybrid, which shows both the aerial and the road, or just the aerial. And with the Esri, or the ArcGIS Online, I could do the imagery, the street map. Let's see how that one's different. Oh, street map data is not available. This is an example of seeing data that's not available with ArcGIS Online, but I can see it with Bing. And that Bing map will show me what these streets are, which is very nice. And I'm guessing Esri's World Topography is probably not available either. Yeah, it's not available. Okay. I'm going to go back to my Bing map. I'm going to use Bing Aerial. Let's go Bing Hybrid so I can see the street names as well. And my objects layers list here, this is a list of all the objects we have mapped. And each different type of object is a layer. So I can turn them on and off. I turned off this area layer here. If I wanted to just look at the cottonwood trees, I can click this button at the top here, which turns everything off. And I can click up here to show just my cottonwoods. I can look down here where my cottonwood trees are mapped. I can change the opacity of it. So if I want to fade them out a little bit, make them a little bit transparent, you can probably see my map. They're sort of fading out a little bit. I did that similarly with the PacifiCorp ownership layer here. Initially, it was just very opaque and green. I couldn't see past it to see my trees, and so I dimmed it down some to about 50% transparency. some things here I want to do. If I want to zoom to a layer, if I want to zoom to just my cottonwood layer here, I can click on that and it'll go to my cottonwoods, which I kind of like that, so I'm going to keep it like that. I'm going to turn my layers all back on again so I can see the other trees. The labels are turned off. So another thing is turning the labels on and off. So if I have a whole bunch of stuff mapped, it could look kind of messy with all the labels. I can go in and turn all the labels off or all the labels on, and or just pick and choose which ones I want on and off. So I want just these turned on for now. I have these guys without labels. If I have a CAD file that has been properly geo-referenced from Esri software, I can bring this CAD file in, and it should pop into place where it belongs. And it could act as a base map layer, a background layer. So say you have a CAD image of like a shopping mall you want to map the irrigation parts around, and that'd be a good example of how you use a CAD map to bring in. So this download base map button here kind of causes some confusion. What this does, if I click this download base map, it'll create a cache of this base map of the area that I can see right here. And what this does is, once I have this downloaded, I can put this on my handheld unit, and then I can see a background air photo of the area I'm at on my handheld unit. And it has a little progress bar that grows, and when it finishes, it should give me a close. There we go. The base map created successfully. The reason why it creates some confusion is if I zoom out far enough, I can't use that anymore. The button grays out. We put a limit on it to about 3,000, I think 3,000 meters around the map is the limit of what it can see. The reason is when you download a base map that's too large, it'll start slowing down your handheld quite a bit and reduce your performance as well. So let me zoom back to my cottonwood layer. And that base map is downloaded. So if I know I want to add some trees to this map here, or add some other parts here, I'm going to go into Start Editing. This is also where I can change stuff around as well. So Start Editing is kind of where you got to get into the beef of using the map portion of this software. And let me turn my labels back on so I know what's what. So if I know this woods rose tree over here is not where it should be, I can go into Move Geometry, click on the tree, and that's on top. Okay, hang on. So right now you can see the top layer here is my Pacific Core ownership. And this may be a problem that some of you may come across when there's a layer on top of another layer. The way to avoid this is change what's editable. And so I'm going to turn everything non-editable right now. So if I know I want to be editing my cottonwoods, and let's just do the woods rows here, then I can take this woods rows layer, grab it, maybe. Let me turn my Pacific Core off first. So I can grab this woods rows and move it around to wherever it needs to be. I think it probably belongs right here on top of this tree that you can see. But we have heard a lot of folks that come across some issues with editing, and really the trick about editing is messing with these object layers here and turning off stuff that's on top of other objects so you can edit things. They're also turning off what's editable and what's not. So you can see I only have my cottonwoods and my woods rows as editable. If I were to go into a golden current here, I can't grab that and move that around because it's not editable. So it kind of protects it from being incorrectly placed somewhere. Another thing is I want to add, let's say I want to add some new parts or some new objects. I have this example database I created for the Bear River Bottoms, and let's just say we have I don't know, anything here, Phragmites. So I only have one thing here for this, and let's say it's on this side of the riverbank here. And so I can just find my area, click there, and then it adds it, and this brings up what I can edit here. Right now I can only edit the labels. I'm just call it number 1, and I can add some comments. And this is the scientific name of it, and this is the common name, the Phragmites. If I want to add a couple more, it'll start counting up the numbers. So that was 1. The second one I added is number 2, and so on and so forth. And that's how you would be adding parts to your map here. After you're editing, I always suggest to click on Save Edits, or click on Save Edits regularly and normally, so in case you make a mistake, your edits are saved. In case your computer shuts down for whatever reason, you'll have your edits saved. When you're finished editing, always click on Stop Editing, this red button here. And let me turn on my Pacific Core layer again. So the two things to do with the map project here is generate a report. And this is where you make a report that you give to your clients or whoever you need. We'll just call this test. And I can include the images I took with the Mesa handheld unit with it. And I can also put on here what I want to show up in the report's list, the attributes. So I want to show labels and the common name. I don't care about this other stuff. I'm going to view the report. I can also change the logo of the report here to put whatever company logo you need on your report. It's taking a little bit of time. And here you can see the report will only show what I'm looking at. And so it didn't show my whole entire area because I was only zoomed into this area here. And it gives me a legend of all my parts here on the side. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit if I can. And here's where my report details are, or the details that I can enter into here. If I need to modify this, I click this Modify Report button up here and add anything else to it. The only thing required is the name of the title. And I'll go down to the list here of what was mapped or was in the report. And here's where I told it to only show me the labels and the common names. And so I have all my cottonwood trees, and this shows me it's the cottonwood, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty self-explanatory. This is also takes a little bit of adjusting. It's kind of an art. And so right here I can see I have my two Phragmites I mapped that are not showing up on the list here. The way to fix that problem is go back into Start Editing and move Geometry. And what I want to do is move these labels to where I can see them better. So I can put this label over here and put this label over here. If I feel that white is not a very good color, I can go into Select the label, click on it with the Select tool. It'll turn a different color. I can go into Label Color, and here I can change my label once it brings it up. Okay. And I think white's a great color, so I don't think let's use yellow. So once I have yellow selected, now it's a yellow color. If I go back into my Generate Report, I need to stop editing first. I need to save my edits, and then stop editing. And I go into Generate Report. Here's where I should see a little bit of difference in my map here, or my reports. And here I can see that the two labels have been moved, and that's kind of a way to. It's like an art. You just need to tinker with it enough to get to what you need to see. One last thing I want to show you with the map window is also a new feature we added to Juniper Aspect, and this is the export project here. I believe if you have the standard edition, you can export to a CSV file, but with the professional editions where you can export to the shapefile, the file geodatabase, or the KML file, which is a Google Earth file. I kind of want to show you an example of each one of these and how to use them. So let's go with the CSV file first. I'm going to export this, and I can look at my options. It tells me what's going to be named, and I have the option of all my layers or just visible layers. Right now they're all visible, so therefore it isn't not much of a difference. And I have an area where I want to download, so I'm going to hit export. And this will export to CSV and also bring it up my folder that I downloaded to. So let's open up this CSV and take a look at it. There's not too much you can do with an export of CSV. It gives you the latitude and longitude, which is very nice. It tells you the attributes here. So I have my labels, my comments, common name, scientific name, that kind of stuff here. One thing you can do with the CSV file, which I find pretty fun to do, if you do want to display this CSV file onto a map somewhere, you can go into ArcGIS Online and just literally drag and drop this CSV onto the map, and it'll put the mapped parts where they belong. And so just for another thing I want to show you real quick, only stuff that is a point, so like trees and shrubs and irrigation parts that have a latitude and longitude will show up on a map. Areas like my Pacific Core ownership or the Bear River lines do not have latitude and longitude here. and so they will not show up onto a map, just kind of as a caveat. So let me pull up ArcGIS Online. I have one open here. So if you just go to arcgis.com, you should have this label list here. You go to the map. Here it'll bring up in a second, it'll bring up a base map. When it takes its time. Let's already have one open. Let's, I think, get a new one here. New map. Okay, once this opens, I should have a new map here. All right, so my new map, it kind of defaults to the United States. I guess it knows where I'm located. If I bring up that folder again that has my CSV file, I just drag and drop this CSV file onto this map somewhere. And it says not all characters are valid because my lines, my polygons will not be mapped. And map data not available. Let me zoom out one tick by rolling the mouse out one time. And here's the trees that I mapped over here. Let me get a different base map so I can show you differently. So in ArcGIS Online, it's something you can use to share with other people different maps. Let me put up the imagery. This is what our software uses, so you should be able to zoom in pretty good with the imagery here. And this is just one example of a way of sharing your data or seeing your data somewhere else, and you can pull up different base maps. We have an OpenStreetMap, there's a topographic map, the Bing maps as well. These are different base maps. And here as well, there's a lot of functionality you can use to bring up other layers of data. So you can search different layers from the web here, or add it from the web. Search for layers. So if I go to search for layers, here I can type in anything I want to find. I mean, maybe there's a rivers database or something. If I spell rivers right. But this would be an example of using the power of the internet to show different things. So if I had to show different national parks, World Hydro Reference Overlay, I'm assuming some of this won't work in our area here because it's a pretty small area that's not very well known. But this is a real brief example of how to use ArcGIS Online to show your data and also to share your data. And anybody can use ArcGIS Online. You can get a free account. They have a personal account, which they allow you to use for personal reasons only. If you want to use it for commercial reasons, they want to charge you for it, but that's up to their discretion. Let me take a look at one more thing here. So another thing you can export to, I won't go over the shapefile or file geodatabase because it might take a little bit of time. I'm kind of running out of time here on my map window. But I'll show you exporting to a KML file, which we like a lot. So one reason this is really helpful is if your imagery is not very good using the Esri imagery or the Bing imagery, exporting to a KML file can bring up, you can put this on a Google Earth image, which a lot of times has better imagery than what Esri or Bing offers. And this is one thing we recommend a lot. So when you do an export to a KML file, you normally see this list here where the file gets downloaded to. If I go to more options, I can click on Export with Custom Icons. And if I do that, it keeps the icons I have here. So let's export this to KML. It'll show me the little list and brings it up here in a folder. All I need to do is double click on this. This will open up Google Earth, and it should pop into the area that I mapped. And kind of depending on internet connection is how fast it'll go. But you should be able to see everything that we saw earlier. So this is everything that we saw earlier. The imagery looks nearly the same, so it's not very different from Esri's. And a lot of times the Google and Esri or Bing imagery is very similar, so you don't get too much of a difference. And as you can tell, it didn't change my my green here to be very transparent. So if I go into my list over here, I can go to Pacific Core Ownership. How do I do this? Go to properties of it, and I can change the opacity to, let's just say, 50%. And here now it looks how it looked before, kind of a little bit transparent, but you can still see it. And another thing that Google Earth does is it brings in the attributes from what I had for my map. And so I didn't have very many attributes. I had the common name was golden current. That's about it. And let's see. And my label here was golden current number 2. So I can zoom in to just taking a look at different trees. I can turn these on or off just like any other GIS type program. And now I can just see my my cottonwood trees once I turn everything else off. And this is an example of using KML files, Google Earth. That's about all I wanted to show you with the map window. There's a lot more I could show you, but I'm kind of running out of time here. But I wanted to ask Jim if we had any questions come up.
We've got a couple, let me read a couple of them to you so that you can answer them, Adrian. One of them was, can you import a Google Earth map into Juniper?
Okay, so for right now, the only way to import any kind of data into this software is from an AutoCAD drawing that's been referenced from the Esri software. And so at the moment, we don't have a way of importing a Google Earth map or even like a shape file or a GIS file per se. But we will be continuing to update the software, and I believe those are kind of pretty important features that will be looked at for future releases of the software.
One of the things that Google Earth does, it's great. They have good imagery, but they're very protective of their map data and everything that they use. In that, they won't let you take anything off of their website. In other words, you can use their website, display things, look at it, put things on it, but you can't take it off, for example, and put it in our handheld, or take it off and put it on our desktop to work with it. That's just their restriction. Their business model says that the whole idea of Google having this is to get you on their website so they can show you advertising.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a good point.
Frank asked us a question, and you did answer it, about ArcGIS Maps Online, and it is free for personal use. If you wanted to take more advantage of it and use it as a communications tool for some reason, they do have subscriptions. I think their subscriptions start at about $2,500 a year for a commercial subscription, and then you get so many transactions for that. But it's a situation where it gives you some power to do things like live maps, communicate with people, sharing these things. So it is available, but for the most part, you're able to do just about everything with Juniper Aspect, because the whole idea is to create maps, and maps are to communicate to customers or your people internally. So anyway, there you have it. Those are the questions so far.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Let's move on to the objects catalog. This is the next topic I want to talk about, and the last topic before we get into any final questions or any specific cases or anything. To get to the objects catalog, you just go into the main menu here and look at objects and go to Manage Object Catalogs. Here's one more thing. With the standard level license, you're allowed to have 2 object catalogs, and every Juniper Aspect comes defaultly with the irrigation parts catalog. I think it's what it's called. Mine's called default part catalog, but this is what you normally saw with Intuit Trace that had the list of about roughly 2,000 common irrigation parts that all irrigation contractors know and use, and with the ability to modify it. And with the standard level license, you get that as well as another one you want to create. With the professional level license, you get unlimited databases here. Well, there may be a limit of like 1,000, but I don't think you'd want to have 1,000. It'd be a lot to go through. And so let's just take a look at the objects catalog here. And this is kind of where you get into a lot of the higher end usage of Juniper Aspect, is looking at the objects catalog. Let me make this larger. And here's where you manage all your objects and everything. There's a couple ways to do it. You can do it using this graphical user interface here, or you can bring in a file from a CSV file the way you have it if you have it modified yourself. I'll get to that in just a second. So I want to take a look at the objects here. And the default catalog, we have it pretty well populated with the common parts like I mentioned earlier. Let's look at backflow devices as an object type. And we have specific icons you can use. So looking at the symbology, we have 3 different ways of symbolizing your part or your object. We have the icon, which let me look at this real quick. We have an icon list that this comes built in with the software and has a lot of common different icon parts for irrigation parts particularly, but also simple things like letter A, letter B that you may want to call things whatever. And this is a way to change icons to whatever you want to look at. Another way to look at this, your symbology here is just a simple symbol, which is a circle, either a circle with a dot in the middle or a square with a dot in the middle. So it's kind of personal preference. You can change the color of that circle and square by dropping down the fill color and picking your color. Right now the default border width is 1. Let's make this large. So I can change my size from 10 pixels, 16, 24, 48 pixels. The larger number, the larger the size piece. This is the largest it can be, which kind of gets a little bit messy on your map when they're that big. But I can change the border width, and as you see me increase this, you can see the border kind of getting thicker and fatter, as well as the dot in the middle gets thicker and fatter. And this is also kind of, it's all really personal preference on what you want it to be. There's also a way of bringing in your own icon. So a custom icon would be something that you have, maybe you have your own list of icons, little images, or you found one on the internet that you wanted to use for a different part or a different object. And I don't have an example right now, but as you look into this list here, the different file formats it wants to use is a PNG, a JPEG, a GIF, or a bitmap. And those are different file types you can use for bringing in your own custom icons for these parts. I'm going to bring it back to the normal size, normal icon, and change it back to 16 pixels. Here is the list of common backflow devices that are used that we found, and it's about looks like about 15 or 20 of them. If I have a new one I want to add, I just go to this object button up here, click on New, and it'll bring up a new list, and I can type in whatever I want to type in. One thing, we get a lot of questions about how do you save this, and the answer is it saves live. And so what that means is as soon as I type it in, it saves it. So it's kind of a live way of formatting it. This can be good and bad. It's good because you don't have to worry about clicking on save or worry about that kind of stuff. If I go into a device here and start messing with it and delete a few things, there's no way of saying, oops, don't save changes. So you kind of have to be careful. For the objects catalog here, we kind of recommend this to be used by more of the higher end users, so we know that there's more quality control with it and people won't be going in and messing things around. But that's the way you add a new object to your object list, and you can see it in here. If you have a, let's see if I find a big one. If you have like a part, an object type that has a ton of items, and this is kind of hard to manage, what you can do is use these columns here. It says drag a column header here to group by that column. So if I want to see, if I drag this manufacturer header up here, it lands it right up here. And now I can see what the different manufacturers are. I only have Hunter, Eritreal, Rainbird, and Toro for controllers. This makes it a lot simpler because I don't have to scroll through all the Hunters to get down to the Rainbirds and the Toros. I can just go straight to the Rainbirds and click on this plus sign, and it'll bring up all what I have of Rainbirds. And it's kind of a fancy way of managing your data a lot easier. And this takes a little bit of playing around with. You can bring up multiple things up in here, so you can do it by manufacturer and by series. And you can see it. These series I can pull up the plus sign of what we have on these series, and it's just a way of kind of sorting and rearranging. And if I want to put it back, I just drop it back down in here and drop it back down, and now we're back to the way it looked originally. So this is kind of a fun way of messing with things, and like I said, it's really useful when you have a large list of objects, like controllers here. It's just tons of hunters and tons of ringbirds and different things. So it helps with things like that. When you have a small list, it's probably a little more cumbersome than it is. Looks like I have a message here that's hard to hear me. I'll try to talk louder. Hopefully I'm talking more into the phone. Okay, that's better. Good, thanks. Let's see. So other things to do with this list here is looking at the object browser attributes. And this is just what will show up on your handheld. So a lot of this is explained in the user manual, which might be a good place to look at for getting an explanation of what each of these things does and kind of more detail about how to use this object part or this managed object catalog list a lot better. And so, for instance, for controllers, this is where I have my object type on. As I'm mapping on a handheld, this is the image that I will see. But for controllers, I have 5 different browser attributes. If I didn't want it to show part number, but I wanted to show part description, I uncheck one and check the other, and this is what it will be showing me. This is basically just a preview of what you'll be mapping, but it only can show you the 3 of the browser attributes on the handheld. And as I click around on different objects over here, it'll update over here on the side to kind of show you an example of what it would look like on the handheld as you're mapping. To change these catalog attributes, this is where you go into the list down here to change catalog attributes. And, if I want to delete an entire catalog attribute, I click on this minus sign. So a lot of things we have in this list are pluses and minuses. So pluses mean to add something, and minuses mean to take away something. So if I didn't want scheduled description anymore on my controllers, I just click on this to remove it. And I hope it gives me a warning before I do this. Let's see what happens. Okay, good. So it gives you a big warning if we delete this. This attribute will also be removed from all objects. Are you sure you want to delete the attribute? And I don't, because that's kind of important. But it does warn you when you delete something, so that's a good thing. If I wanted to add a new thing, I'm not sure what else you can add. Like maybe if you have a certain cost associated with each object, I can just type in cost and click on this plus sign, and it adds it down here at the bottom. So now each one of my controllers will have a cost attribute, and I can type in whatever things would cost. I'm not even sure, but this can be up to your own discretion and everything. The next thing to look at is the in-field attributes. This is kind of the questions that you ask in the field. And so let me pull up the list here if I can have no, not this. Let's just go with controllers. Okay, so let's say that for each of my controllers, I want to ask what the date it was installed. So I type in something like date installed, and I have data types here. You can use text, integer numbers, decimal numbers, or a date field, and so I'll use date. So now let me hit add to add this infill attribute. So now for each one of my controllers that I'm mapping with my handheld, it'll ask me this question here, what date was it installed? And you type in a date onto your handheld. And that's just a way, this can be modified to whatever you need it to show, or whatever questions you need to ask. You can look at what condition the object is in, or what color, what size, what age, that kind of stuff. Another way of doing this is by selectable attributes, and this asks a question with a set amount of answers. And so if I have age as an example, it asks me which attributes I want for age. And so just in general, I say old, new, whatever. And so now for each one of my controllers that I map, it'll ask me what age it is, and it'll ask me if I could choose old or new. I can also type in whatever I want to type in. Some people type in have a blank one. I guess you can do that on a different way of doing it, but just so if you don't want to answer the question at all, you can just type in nothing. But this is a way of using this is kind of how we call asking the user questions in the field. And this is, like I said, it's all modifiable to however you want it to be, and you can use it however you want to use it. It's very powerful, it's very customizable, and it's all dependent on the user and what they want to map and what kind of questions they want to answer and what kind of data they want to collect. Now, kind of one of the higher end of the higher end here is messing with the import and export options of this object catalog. And this is kind of where you can get into a lot of, I don't know, it could be a lot of work, but also it could be very easy to bring in a large database of parts. And so there's really two ways of adding a database of objects to your system here. You can do it manually by just, if I have a new object type, let's say I want to map landscapes for some reason, and this is going to be a polygon, so it's an area, and the landscapes will have, I'm not sure what kind of attributes I want, but let's just use size for example. So this would be a manual way of adding a new object type to your object list here. And so I want to add, maybe size is not a very good example, but I want to add more objects to my list here. I have a large one, maybe a small one, and so forth and so on. So this would be a way of doing it. But what I find probably is an easier way of doing this is by doing it through the CSV file, through the import-export here. And like I said, in the user manual, this explains it in great detail how to do this if you kind of get stuck in the jam. But I find the easiest way of doing this, or to get an example of how to format your CSV, is to first export the one you already have, like the common irrigation parts. Take a look at how it's formatted and how it's modified, and then kind of go from there. And so let's take a look at that. Let's export this list here to a CSV file. We'll just put it in here. We'll call it default parts catalog and export it. It might take a while because there's 2,000 parts it's trying to export, and you see the list starts growing as it starts exporting more object types, and it's finished. And so then after it finishes, it brings up your folder again with your objects here. And so the way that Juniper Aspect is different from IntuiTrace is we kind of have a more robust way of doing the catalog import and export. It now brings up two CSV files. The CSV file, just for your information, is a comma-separated values file. It's basically an Excel file, but it can also be opened up in like a notepad type format. And so the two files that it'll always export it'll make its own folder, and it'll export an object types file and then the name of your object catalog. So mine was called default part catalog. So let's take a look at the object types. And when I open it, it brings up an Excel document. This is each of my object types that I had made here. And in here, let me make these larger so they're easier to see. And make my screen larger as well. Okay. So in here, the top line are all the column headers. Maybe if I make this bold, it might be easier to eliminate those. And so the first thing, always the first thing, is your object type. And this is what my object types were: the backflow devices, the controllers, etc. And the one that I added was landscapes. The second one is always the geometry. So the three options for a geometry are point, line, and polygon. It looks like this separates this alphabetically first, but also looks at point, line, and polygon in this order. And then here's where you do the rest of your stuff. So S: is an infield attribute, the one I typed in for a controller, the date. And then S: is a selectable attribute. So the one I chose was age, and my two options were old and new, and I had that period there just for the one I don't want to map. You can change the colors here. So the pound sign with all the zeros, that's the black color. To know what the different colors are, go back into my drawing here. I could look at this color list here, and this type of orange, whatever that is the hex key color for that. And so if you know what the colors are in this format, then you can do that easily. If not, it will assign it for you defaultly. My border thickness, this is the backflow one that made to an 8 thickness earlier when I had that square that had a real fat line around it. If I had a custom image, this is where I'd find the custom image, the fill color. Most of these have an icon. So the backflow devices had that icon there. Let's look at controllers, had that icon number 12. So if I go back to my controllers, and look at the Symbology, this irrigation controller symbol is number 12. If I put my mouse over it, it tells me number 12 down there, as you can see. Each one of our custom icons has a number associated with it, and they're kind of scattered here and there, but you can see which one is by just putting your mouse over it. It'll tell you the C11 here is number 110. So if you did have a custom icon, that's where you put it in here. If you had the simple type of icon, you would tell it if it's a square or a circle, and the symbol type here. It is, so everything you can do on that list there, you could do in the CSV, which is just more of a top-level way of doing things. If you have a large amount of data, this is the best way to do it. If you have just a couple things you want to add, I'd add it using the other method. I can close this window and open up, oops, where'd it go? Open up the other one. So my default part catalog CSV here, this is all the default parts that I just added. Let's make this larger again to make it easier to see. And again, the top line here are the column headers, and so each one of these, as always, the first one is object type, and the second one is geometry. That's always the case. And here's this kind of how it looked with Intuitrace. This is how it used to look. And so with Juniper Aspect now we have the 2 CSVs. You can still load just this one here, where it's just this one here. So it's the older way of loading the CSV is from this way, and it'll bring it in just fine. But we do recommend using the 2 CSV method to kind of get a better modification of your parts. This is a way of just looking at a few things here. I want to show you an example. So say I want to get a list of, I know that there's a wetland plant database that I want to take a look at. So the USDA has a real large wetland plant database of like 8,000 common wetland plants. And they have a way you can grab this in a Excel format. And I did this, and I brought it in and modified it a little bit. Let's see if I can take a look at it. It's pretty large. But where did I put this? Wetland plant. And so with about 8,000 parts, it'll probably take a little bit longer to open than one with a couple hundred parts. And so you see, oh, it wasn't too slow, actually. And so here's where I just brought in all the names here. So in this list here, let me go back to my list here. It had symbol, scientific name, common name, all these other types of headers here. I just brought this into Juniper Aspect, and I have all this stuff here for each one of my wetland plants. And so if I was doing a large wetland plant mapping project, this would be a good way to use it. Or maybe I could sort it by region. So if I know I'm just looking at plants that are in the Intermountain West or something like that, I could probably find ones that are hitting that different attribute there. But this is kind of an example of how you can use the internet to find databases of things. And so you can see I have just tons of object types here of different plant types. And so if I just pick a random one here, I can see most of these have just one object in them. Some will have multiple objects, but it was kind of, and here's one that has 2 objects in it. So this is just an example of how to do that. Another one I kind of wanted to show off is Utah has a list of water-wise plants, and I think this would be nice for if you're doing mapping in Utah, if you wanted to do some landscape mapping. The issue here is, let's see if I can get a list here, browse. The issue here is this is not any kind of table format. You can see I had different cacti, coniferous trees, deciduous trees, etc. What I did is I just kind of dragged this down here. I can see each one is kind of a table format, and I copied and pasted that to an Excel table, tweaked it a little bit, and I was able to bring it into here, and it makes a pretty nice little list. Let me make this larger. And so I have the different types. I have the trees, the grasses, the ground covers, and if I look at each one of these, this is my list here. I have the Latin name and the common name for each one. And if I had a little image for each one, I could bring that in as well with the custom icon types. And this makes a pretty nice addition to any kind of landscape mapping you want to do in somewhere like Utah or so. But that's just a way of using the power of different databases you have and just bring it in, modify it a little bit to hit the right format that we're looking at, and it brings it in pretty quickly and pretty easily. And let's see. I think that's kind of all I wanted to talk about on the objects catalog side. Jim, do we have any questions about that?
We've had a couple of questions going along here.
Okay.
I think that the main thing about these parts catalogs, Frank asked if we do updates to the parts catalog, and typically we don't. And the reason is that we give our customers the capability of making these changes, because in a typical scenario, when you get this database, you will end up probably taking it all apart and keeping the items in that database that you use specifically in your operation and adding items to it that you use in your operation, as opposed to carrying around a full-blown catalog. Another question was, for example, the databases that Adrian has shown here and other ones that we have created as samples, can we make those available? And the answer is sure we can. Right now, if you're interested in any of these, just let Adrian know and he can email you a copy of the CSV file for you to import. It is our plan to be able to have a place on our website where these are available. Simple ones like a database that would include areas, so that you could say, I want to map turf areas, or I want to map hardscape areas, or I want to map property lines or building lines or anything like that. Things where, you know, we've got sample road map signs, we've got sample streetlight signs, we've got our databases. Any of those that would be good, be nice to have them on our website. We plan to do that, and also give the ability for our customers to share some of the sample databases that they've done with each other. Let's see if there were any others here that we wanted to talk about. I think that that was the main gist of it. I guess the only thing I would emphasize with this is that this ability to create databases and control them and add things to them is probably one of the most powerful features of the system. It gives you the ability to be creative and to, you know, map whatever you want or whatever makes sense for you and your operation. And, you know, we've got customers that have done electric dog fence databases, ornamental lighting databases, shrubbery, trees, anything that you want to document or maintain, you can create a database for it. And I think that would probably be time well spent to become very familiar with creating and maintaining these databases, because it'll really help you to get the most out of the system. And I don't see any others, so.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at a couple of questions here as well, and we have one question about, will I be going over any of the capturing information on the handheld device? And,
yes.
Yes. Yeah, not in this seminar. I just wanted to keep this specific just to the desktop side, but we definitely will have another seminar coming up. I believe we have one scheduled for January. I think that is about tips and tricks with the handheld device, and that would be a good one to attend. On our website, let me take a look at our website so I can show you our calendar. So I go back into Juniper Systems here. I go into, you go to support and then go to training. Down here is our online calendar. So if I click on the training, this will, oh, well then you click on the calendar button down here at the bottom. This will open up a new window that, in a second, I'll bring up a calendar. And so here I have the calendar for today's date of Juniper Aspect training, if I go over to January, it also tells you where we're going for different shows. It looks like we have 1 of 2 trainings scheduled. This one is about, it is about field data collection with using Juniper Aspect and GPS. And we have 2 dates scheduled there, so I'm not sure if we're going to do 2 seminars or if we're going to see what the better dates are and send out like an email questionnaire to see what they want to attend. And looks like we might have one scheduled for February as well. This is about just a little more in-depth feature about using the object catalog and Juniper Aspect on the desktop side. So that's a good question about the capturing information on the handheld.
Another question is about recording them, and typically our practice is to record these and then post them on YouTube so that we can make them available to you to look at a later date. And so knowing that if you missed one, you should be able to find it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Days after the webinar.
Right, and this is recording. I didn't forget. Sometimes we forget to hit the record button.
I'm the only one that forgets to record it. So.
Okay, yeah, this one's recording, and so this will be, once we kind of get it modified a little bit and get it loaded onto YouTube, we'll send out an email to a lot of folks who weren't able to attend, and so they can watch the webinar and go from there. Let me go back into my PowerPoint here, and really the last slide here is kind of talking about the contact information. You all probably have our phone number and such. That you might want to write this down in case you need to get a hold of us. And the email for support questions can go to support@juniperassist.com. And if you want just general information about our product, about getting some specific data sheets and things like that, going to juniperassist.com/aspect will bring you to our Juniper Aspect product page. And there's other ways you can get to there. Just go to juniperassist.com, and from there you can find our products or find support questions or support information, and that's kind of really how to get a hold of us. And there's multiple ways. And as always, if you have any more questions later on, if you come up with any kind of things you need to talk about, you can always send us an email or give us a call. You can ask for Adrian. That's my name. I handle the majority of my time is spent working on Juniper Aspect, so I guess they consider me the support expert on that topic. And if we don't have any further questions, we can conclude this webinar. Jim, do we have anything else?
Sean, did you have something? I see you had your hand up. Apparently not. I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, Sean, if you're still with us, if you have a question later on, you can always send an email. Let me go back to that page here. If you send an email to support@juniperassist.com or give us a call, and we'll be happy to answer your question. And that's the best way to get a hold of us. And I guess that's the last thing I'm here to say. And I thank you all for attending, and I appreciate your time and listening to me ramble on about what you can do with this software. And I'm glad you all are using this. And I'm always curious to hear about the projects you're doing. So if you just want to kind of talk about what you're doing, we're always very interested in hearing what kind of things you're mapping. We have guys who are mapping thousands of trees on a university campus and all kinds of fun stuff that we'd like to hear about. And feel free to just give us a call to chat. Thanks.